And we'll start here in just a minute at the top of the hour. Thank you everyone for coming in to join us for our final course development workshop for the 2023 calendar year. It looks like it's 2 o'clock my time where I'm at, so we will get started. And again, welcome to the December 2023 course development workshop, Developing Workplace and Real World Relevance. Last year in 2022, we went over the fundamentals of course development, covering topics like learning outcomes, backward design, scaffolding assessments, feedback, and evaluation. In 2023, we've been digging in a bit deeper with topics like accessibility, DEI, and the four foci of course development: student engagement, critical thinking, building a sense of community of learners, and finally, developing workplace and real-world relevance. If you missed any of these sessions, they are available on the UAGC YouTube channel, and Diana will drop that in the chat for you now. Today, we are going to discuss developing workplace and real-world relevance and why that is important in both course development and facilitation. We have two guest speakers joining us today. Matt Phillips from Student Affairs will share a career services perspective, and Brandy Havens will share the faculty perspective in course development. We will jump into breakout rooms to hear from you how you've leveraged your expertise to incorporate workplace and real-world relevance in the classroom. At the end of today's session, we'll share application tips that both course developers and facilitators may find useful. All right, now we'd like to take a poll to see how comfortable you are with using workplace skills in the classroom. So I believe Diana will pop up that poll here. So then we would like to know, how confident do you feel about incorporating workplace and real world relevance into the classroom? So just go on and review those options. And we'll wait just a moment, make sure we have everyone's responses. I see a lot in there already. All right, I see that we have some people that could teach us a thing or two, and we are definitely hoping for that. We would also love to just bring everyone's thoughts and ideas together. Yes, and overall fairly confident and confident, which is really great to see. And as we go through the session, we'll see that this does relate to our critical goals. So it is something that's really great to see that we're already feeling very confident about this. All right, so why is it important to incorporate workplace and real-world relevance? All right, first off, it offers high-value credentials with marketable skills, which we know is one of our student critical goals here at UAGC. It is also associated with adult learning theory, increasing student engagement and motivation. It also offers more effective learning experiences, and we know that when students see the relevance of what they're learning, it really does help them understand better what they're learning. And then also it can deepen their connection and sense of belonging to the institution, which again is supporting our student critical goals here at UAGC. All right, now I'd like to welcome our first guest, Matt Phillips, the Program Manager of Student Affairs.
Hi, Caitlin. Thanks so much. Interesting to see the survey results. I'm glad that people are fairly confident. That's a real big change, I think, from a few years back. Am I good to go to the next slide? Can we do it? Rad. Okay. Thanks, everyone in advance for listening. I think they told me I have 10 minutes. I will try not to speak for 10 minutes. Is that still correct, Diana? 10 minutes, that-ish? Okay, cool. I'll try to dispel like some myths. So when I first started working in course developments a few years back as a rep from Career Services, there was a huge subject matter expert focus on asking students to create job search documents, right? Like resumes, cover letters. A lot of this focus, I believe, came from previous iterations of the career team, various institutional leaders and initiatives. Based on my experience now, I think building these kinds of documents can be helpful for some students, but only at certain times in a student or job seeker's life, right? So it's really hard to know when that is as a course developer. So I do not believe, based on my experience of the past 5 years, that resume and cover letter assignments help the majority of students most of the time. Take a look at this slide. Our perspective in career services is that students need to know what they can do, what are they competent in, or what do they have mastery of, and they need to be able to articulate that. On our side, we have a lot of students come to us for career coaching appointments, and this is just the ones we get. They have a lot of trouble with that. And it doesn't really matter if they're underemployed or unemployed, or if they're, like a full tuition grant student or even a military student. So that's what we like to focus on in course devs is what can students do? Do they know they can do that stuff? Or what can they use? Do they know it? Some programs of study align like super well with industry or occupation specific applications, right? So I think it's often easier to build real world learning activities in those programs of study. And if you're part of that program of study, like, Brandy's going to talk about accounting, for instance. I think there's some real world application there, pretty much every single learning activity. So that's a little bit easier. I rarely get asked to help in those programs of study, to be quite frank. I think where we run into challenges as an institution is around programs of study that have more leeway in real world application, right? So liberal arts comes to mind. It seems like every week in the New York Times, I see an article or an op-ed from a humanities scholar or liberal arts scholar proclaiming the value of humanities and liberal arts. They never put forth the best version of the argument. I haven't written my own op-ed because I probably wouldn't be accepted, but I think I have a better argument, which I'm going to try to lay out for the value of that degree program or those types of degrees. So example, liberal arts team here, Dr. Adrian Hansen and Dr. Stephanie Fink, they've been revising that program to help students practice and articulate softer, durable skills, right? That makes sense. But in tandem with that, they've also developed reflective activities using Folio and other tools that encourage students to identify technologies they are using as they move through the curriculum. So the use and mastery or competence in using technologies, think PowerPoint, think Photoshop, Excel, Google's various tools, are real world workplace applicable in every case. So when a job description lists those technologies and students as job candidates have competence in using those technologies, they got to say so. I can tell you for a fact they often don't. So asking students in coursework and learning activities to reflect on and articulate the technologies they are using and know how to use is incredibly valuable, especially if you're not in one of those programs or you're in a general ed course that's a little more, what's the word I'm looking for? There's more leeway, right? In what students are going to be trying to do in the real world after they get their degree or in tandem with it. Let's see in my slide. On the right side of the list here, these are some ideas that are not resume or cover letter, right? I think you can also parse out sections of the resume as a scaffolded series of reflective activities. One learning activity could be like craft a summary of qualifications for your resume and then have a reflective piece of writing justifying that or arguing for why that matters or analyzing it. So like in all cases with career, I think you can look at what you want students to accomplish and like they may just not get there. So I think a more granular scaffolded approach is always better. Normally when faculty come to me with ideas, which I'm always open to that, like that's my job, so you can easily email me. I often say, okay, here's what we're looking at now. Let's like hit on this piece because that's just more accomplishable for students. and it's more manageable from a learning perspective, and it's often more impactful. So you can also see on the slide, I'm using the word metacognitive here. My use of the word is a little, I guess, sideways. It's not really quite correct. But my point is, students should reflect on and be able to say what they know and say what they could do. If your students can't do that by the end or after a course, that's, I believe, a problem. I've seen that be a problem. Let's actually, problem-based learning is at the bottom of my list there. Like, that always makes sense as well. I'm trying to think what else I can say here. I don't know. I find relationship proximity exercises really interesting. So like asking students to list all the people they know who are working and all the people they know those people know. And then like you kind of like build through that and reflect on who they can approach about certain things is important. Professional correspondence. Students can practice soft skills by crafting professional correspondence, even if they're just samples or templates, because our students have trouble, most students have trouble getting themselves to do that. Like they won't send a message on LinkedIn to someone they want to connect with. They're afraid. So asking students to do that kind of work in a way that's meaningful based on learning outcomes is helpful. Can you go to the next slide, Diana, please? Oh, perfect. Okay, this is from Dr. Sandra Rebor, ABS 200. We crafted a career exploration journal, and you can see it has two options. The side-by-side picture is just the two options, so you can see what they are. One was for if you want to pursue a career in applied behavioral sciences, that was going to be your option. And if you're just here for professional growth, right? That's a second option. Sandra knew the types of students she had in this course, and so we built it based on that. Why do we do a journal reflection as opposed to a discussion forum? This is really important. There's a subset of our students as an open access education that do not have the same white collar background that many students might at other institutions. And so saying it in a very sensitive manner, like I really have found that the discussion forums allow for incorrect career beliefs, irrational career beliefs to sort of spiral. And students who don't have a good background in especially like white collar professions, they take those things to heart that other students say in the discussion forums. And if we don't have an adequate redirect in the discussion forum, or as you all know, like sometimes students just don't see the replies, it can become a real problem. We actually coach students and we trace back things that they say to their coursework, and we see, oh, a fellow student told them this years ago and they latched onto it. So I like the journal assignments because the instructor is able to assess the writing. And if a redirect is necessary for a student, or if we can connect a student to an adequate resource, the instructor can do that. And we don't have like students chiming in, like saying all this stuff that isn't quite true or isn't very helpful. And so having the instructor be able to assess a career exploration journal is really helpful. It's also a low stakes assignment, right? Like it's not going to make or break anything for a student. It's just an opportunity for you for your faculty to sort of get a handle on things. Will you go to the next slide, please? This is the journal. This is how we bullet pointed it out and how we asked the students to address certain things. Sandra wanted to build a list of career-oriented activities. And that was pretty cool because I was able to take everything that a career coach would love a student to do in ABS and like just list it for them. And they could download that. And there were links in there and stuff. And it's really cool because it's like, if they need this stuff, short-term, long-term goal setting, it's there. And they're asked to reflect on it. So we're just presenting them with resources as they go in, trying to connect them at the bottom here to some co-curricular opportunities. Again, none of this is going to make or break the assignment if they don't do one or two things, but it's exposing them to stuff. Next slide, please. I'm almost done, I promise. This one is a LinkedIn profile guide. Pretty cool. We built this a couple years back and we've used it in multiple courses, but what's really cool about this, a lot of instructors wanted students to go on LinkedIn. Well, you can't really force them to do that. Some students have privacy concerns. If you work with military students, you know that students may have protection orders. There's all sorts of reasons for this. But, you know, we built this template and it was really cool. It walked through, it's a reflective activity worksheet, walking them through creating a LinkedIn profile, which is a reflective exercise, like making a resume. And what was cool is I worked with Dr. Kelly Olson Stewart recently. She wanted to do this for doctoral level students. And so we modified this one to be more doctoral specific. It's a lot different, but it looks the same. And so, you know, we have all sorts of things like this we can do, tons of ideas, ways to approach things that if you have a great idea, you know, we can work together to figure it out. Like you're definitely not alone in that process. So it's important to reach out. Will you go to the next slide, please, Dan? This one is pretty cool. So worked with Dr. Dana Dillard on this and Dr. Michelle Majors, as well as Desiree Conacher, who's one of our lead career coaches. This was a career exploration journal for Sci 600, which is the entry point course for the master's program in psych. Pretty cool. So we had 3 options here. If you're interested in a career in psychology, if you're already working in the field, or for those who will not pursue. And so you hit all those students. And then this program has a special terms and conditions disclaimer that's really important students understand. So we actually integrated that into the reflective piece of writing and into the learning experience itself, which was another way to get students information that is occupation, real world applicable, you know, as part of their learning experience. So they're really thinking like, okay, I'm here for this reason. How does it really pan out in the future? And I need to think about that now. I think this is week 2, if I remember right. So, you know, that's kind of a couple of good examples. The journal I love because you can assess it as faculty. I can't remember. Did I have one more slide? I don't think I did. No. Okay. It's Brandy. I did want to say one last thing before we jump to Brandy. Sorry. As it comes to course design, I'm going to list some faculty that come to mind. Amanda Kozel, Connie Lower, Nate Pritz, Bill Davis. They have career-focused assignments, or not assignments, announcements or messages they send, redirect language they build. And we see a lot of students reach career services that way. It's like the majority of our traffic. So don't underestimate working with us or anybody else to encourage the use of strategically placed, like what I'd call supplemental materials. I see those materials, especially redirect language that you help associate faculty with, as part of the course design. Like I'm actually thinking of that as I'm building assignments. So that's really important. What else? Last thing I'll say, we've got a ton more info in our section, the career readiness section of the course development hub. I encourage you to explore that, and I will put my email in the chat. That's it. Thank you.
I also want to add that I was fortunate to work with Matt with the Sci 600 course development, and he was also really great at adding an announcement in the course that was relevant to the assignment. So there is a great amount of resources, and Matt is a great resource if you're thinking about adding those in your courses. All right, now I would like to welcome Brandy Havens, one of our faculty members from the Department of Professional Studies and FSBT.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to share some of the ways that we've been trying to incorporate real-world application into our accounting courses. In subjects like accounting and finance that are not only quantitative, but also highly regulatory and rules-based, it's not always easy to incorporate or promote creativity, originality, new ideas, and those tend to be some of the things that normally make courses, interesting, fun, and engaging. As it turns out, the regulatory agencies like the SEC and the IRS don't always appreciate our creativity, which is unfortunate, right? But not to worry, all is not lost, because as course designers, we just have to be a little bit more creative to build content that's relevant and engaging for our students. So one of the ways that we've been trying to do that is through the incorporation of real world examples and applications. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to share just a few examples. All right, next slide, please. Next. Perfect. Thank you. All right. So one of the course where we've made some recent changes is ACC 205, which is Principles of Accounting 1. It's essentially an introduction to financial accounting course. It is the first course in the BA in accounting program, but it's also a requirement in several other programs, such as our BA programs in business economics, operations management, marketing, HR management. So basically, we have a lot of students that have to take this course. Some are accounting majors, but many of them are not. And so one of the biggest challenges that we tend to face in this course is the initial fear and apprehension that students feel. Many will start out saying things like, I'm terrible at math, or I'm not very good with numbers. They're just really, really afraid of the content. They think it's going to be too hard. They think they're not going to be able to understand it. So one of the things that we did in our most recent revision to the ACC 205 course is to modify a couple of the discussion prompts in the first 2 weeks to try to help students make the connection between business, finance, and personal finance, because all of our students are adults, and so they all have some experience with finance on a personal level. They may not recognize it as such, but they have it, and so we want to get them to recognize that. And essentially, we wanted to use that to make our content feel a little bit more relatable. So, for example, in one of the week 1 discussion prompts, we ask students to prepare a mock or hypothetical balance sheet, where they can provide examples of personal assets, liabilities, and equity. While the concept of equity, when we're talking about corporations, can feel really complicated, when students are able to see that it's kind of like their net worth on a personal level, then the concept suddenly becomes more relatable and it's less intimidating to them. In the same discussion, students are asked to analyze how they would like for their balance sheet to look different 10 years from now. And most of them will quickly say they want to have more assets, they want to have fewer liabilities, they want to have a greater net worth. So by, enabling them to make that connection between their personal finances and business finances, they're suddenly understanding what the relationship between these accounts means. And we do something very similar in week 2. This time we do it with an income statement. Now, an income statement's a fairly simple concept. It's just revenues minus expenses gives you net income, but it's something that beginner accounting students really struggle with. And so in this discussion, we ask students to share examples of financial transactions that might affect their personal income statements. For example, when they get their paycheck, that's like earning revenue. And when they pay a bill, like their rent or their car payment, that's an expense. And again, they're asked to look ahead and explain, well, what types of changes would you have to make to improve profitability? And most students quickly start to realize that a company's income statement basically works the exact same way as an individual's. The revenues and expenses look a little bit different, but at the end of the day, it's all about making sure that the revenues are greater than the expenses so that you have a profit, or cash, at the end of the month or year. And these discussions are also a really great opportunity for our associate faculty to engage with the students and share their experiences and input as well on these statements. And we've gotten some really positive feedback from students. Being able to relate the concepts to an individual level has just made it, again, a little bit less intimidating for them. Next slide, please. All right, so next I'm going to talk about some of the changes that we made in our ACC 308 Accounting Information Systems course. Now, this course is part of the BA in Accounting program, so it is only accounting majors that would normally take this course. So our idea for making this course a bit more relevant and relatable was to focus on authentic assessments with some real-world applicability. So I'm going to highlight just a few of the assessments that we put into the course. One authentic assessment that we added is a risk matrix, and the students are asked to select a real-world company. It could be their employer or just a company that interests them. But they prepare a risk matrix, identifying and explaining at least 5 specific risks that their selected company faces. They have to assign likelihood scores and impact scores and calculate the total risk score. Based on that, they're asked to evaluate how those risk scores might influence management's decisions and strategies. Another authentic assignment that I added in this course is a balanced scorecard, which is basically just a performance management tool. I'm sure a lot of you guys have used something similar to that. But Accounting Information Systems provides us with some unique opportunities for implementation and measurement. So in this assignment, again, students select a real world company that interests them, and they complete the assignment from the perspective of that chosen company. It does not have to be the same company that they've used in previous assignments. You know, students are free to explore multiple companies. But from that company's perspective, they identify key components within each of the 4 dimensions of the scorecard, which are the customer perspective, the financial perspective, business processes, and learning and growth. And for each component, they provide at least 2 examples of applicable metrics that management of that specific organization might be able to use to gauge success in that area of the business. Lastly, in ACC 308, we created a final assignment that's a presentation. And in this case, they don't necessarily look at it from a specific company, but they do look at current issues and trends that are relevant, you know, in the field at the moment. So a few of the requirements include discussing specific examples of disruptive and emerging technologies that they think are relevant now and will be relevant over the next decade. Recommending best practices for cybersecurity, evaluating real-world uses and applications for data analytics and data visualization. Next slide, please. All right, now I'm going to shift gears a little bit and share some examples from our Master of Accountancy program. So BUS 591, which is Financial Accounting and Analysis, this is actually our gateway course into the Master of Accountancy program. This is the very first course that students will take in the MAC program. And so for that reason, we really wanted to make sure that this course was engaging and interesting for our students. So in the most recent revision, we added several new elements to help students both relate the concepts to real world practice and also hopefully build some valuable workplace skills. So one of the first things that we did was we added some Tableau simulations. You know, increasingly companies are looking for employees with skills in data analytics. So you know, if students can add to their resume that they have some experience, you know, doing analytics in Tableau, thought that would be a great thing. So we added those. We also added some Excel simulations. While it may not feel quite as exciting, you know, as some of the other data analytic tools, those working in accounting and finance still rely pretty heavily on Excel. So we want to take every opportunity to help reinforce those skills with our students. And so the simulations help to teach students some of the higher level skills in terms of building formulas and using the data analytics tools that are built into Excel. We also added some case study sets where students analyze various financial metrics for Apple and Google, and then they evaluate the performance of each of those companies. Next slide. All right, last one, I'm going to talk about ACC 695. This is our capstone course in the Master of Accountancy program. So I really had a lot of fun with this one because, you know, given that this is a capstone course, we had a lot more flexibility in what we were able to cover. So I'm going to talk about just a few of the authentic assignments that, that I added to this course. One thing that we're really trying to do in our accounting courses at both the undergraduate and graduate level is to incorporate global perspectives and also integrate diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout the program, you know, anywhere we can. And ACC 695 really provided a fantastic opportunity to do that. So one of the assignments that I created was for students to create an ESG newsletter using Canva. So for anyone who isn't familiar, ESG refers to environmental, social, and governance issues, and it's been gaining a lot of traction in terms of corporate reporting over the last decade or so. In fact, more than 95% of the companies in the S&P 500 currently issue corporate sustainability reports. So for this assignment, students visit the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board website, which provides industry-specific reporting guidance for more than 75 industries. And they select an industry either where they currently work or where they hope to work in the future. They review standards and best practices, including, sustainability disclosure topics and accounting metrics. And then they prepare an ESG newsletter to highlight the purpose and structure of sustainability standards, any unique ESG considerations for their selected industry, and specific disclosure topics and accounting metrics that they think are important for that specific industry. Another unique assignment in the capstone course is a SWOT analysis infographic. This time students choose a real world company that interests them, but it must be a publicly traded company because they use the 10K annual report that's filed with the SEC. And based on the company's disclosed risk factors, they prepare an infographic highlighting the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that they feel are the most valid or significant for the company. And then another assignment in this course that I think is a lot of fun is a presentation on internal controls and fraud prevention. For this assignment, students use the Occupational Fraud Report to the Nations. It's a document that is published biannually by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. So they republish every 2 years. If you're not familiar with it, to give you some context, it's normally about 100 pages, and it provides every detail and statistic that you can possibly imagine based on an in-depth study of more than 2,000 cases of occupational fraud across more than 130 countries. Now, that's from the most recent report, but that's pretty standard. I've been reading these reports for years. It's usually at least 2,000 cases, at least 120 to 130 countries. Again, anything you can think of related to these cases, they have the statistics for it. You can learn about types of occupational fraud, methods of detection, reporting mechanisms. They look at schemes based on industry. They look at the internal control weaknesses that drove them, anti-fraud controls. You'll see perpetrator statistics, geographic statistics, all sorts of good stuff. So for this assignment, students select, again, either the industry where they currently work or an industry where they hope to work, and they prepare a presentation focusing on internal controls and fraud prevention for that specific industry. Some of the things that they're asked to specifically cover in the presentation are going to be the primary types of occupational fraud that are applicable for that selected industry, the internal control weaknesses that most commonly contribute to the fraud, the effectiveness of anti-fraud controls, perpetrator statistics, including common behavioral red flags. And finally, they recommend specific steps that management can take to solidify their internal control environment and enhance fraud prevention and detective activities. So those are just a few of the things that we're doing in the accounting department to try to bring in real world examples, application, and relevance into our courses. I know that we're going to be heading to the breakout room soon, so I'm going to be excited to hear what you guys are doing in your courses. So Caitlin and team, I'm going to hand it back to you guys.
Thanks, Brandy. Before we go into the breakout rooms, does anyone have any questions for Brandy or Matt while their presentations are fresh in your mind? You can type it in the chat, or you can just pop off microphone and ask it. While folks are thinking about questions that they might have, before we jump into our breakout rooms, please know that there's no pressure to turn on your camera, to go on microphone. We want you to be comfortable in sharing, and you can also feel free to be an observer. We do encourage you to stick around because afterwards we always try to come back and share our key takeaways. So there's still more to come after the breakout sessions. And if you think of questions later for Brandy and Matt, there'll be time at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and send you off for about 10 minutes. today we'd like you to discuss, we recognize that all of our faculty have amazing experience and expertise in your field. And so how do you leverage that experience and expertise to create workplace and real world relevance in the classroom? What are you already doing? Or what have you done in the past? So I'm going to post that question in the chat so that you do have that available to look at. And I'm going to send you off now.
The breakout room cut me off. I was saying something really eloquent. It's probably just restating what I already said, but anyway.
Well, welcome back, everybody. I would love for you to share either in the chat or come off microphone what your key takeaways were from your breakout sessions.
Mm.
Who wants to go first? Kate, you don't have to raise your hand. You can just go.
Well, I'm trying to be polite. Just as we were getting off, Michael Hayden was talking about his experience in live learning and that no one of us is any smarter than all of us. And I'm about, as my team knows, about ankle deep in my study of andragogy right now. So not that far, but far enough to be dangerous, right? And really what they talk about for our adult learners is that a primary goal for the classroom environment for adult learners is that co-construction of knowledge. And though the I almost said the adult, though the instructor, may have more expertise in a particular subject matter, the two things are not mutually exclusive. So our adult learners can also have expertise in specific areas. And if we take the approach of the sage, rather the God on the side versus a sage on the stage, and approach our learning as an opportunity for both us as the educator and for the students to co-construct that knowledge, bringing in your expertise, bringing in your experience. There were so many great, I wish everybody would just take 5 minutes and record all of because it was so awesome. But I love the idea that, we're seeing the value of the knowledge that our students have and the experience that they bring to the classroom, and supporting that by also sharing as the facilitator, also sharing our experience, also sharing our ideas. I did want to point out that Chris was talking about how he finds where the students are living, the general area, and throughout a course in his master's program, he will seek out information in their particular area and present that in his interactions with them. Whoa. And I mean, that's amazing. Talk about bringing that right to the student's doorstep, right? This is the area that you want to, build your career around. Here's examples that are happening just outside your door. Let's talk about this. Let's dialogue. What a great relationship building.
I really like that too. So many people have great experiences and we should take advantage of that. Does anybody else want to share from one of the other rooms, maybe?
I'll just say that everybody in the room I was in had great examples of really applying their own expertise to enhancing student learning and the experience. So to me, I feel like we're ahead of the game in that regard. And to me, it's really exciting to see that, because it's a big change from when I first started here. And so that's really, really cool.
Awesome. Lynn, go ahead.
Since nobody else is stepping up from my room, not to guilt anybody, promise. Um, I will do it. We talked about real world examples of work that they're doing. We talked about, Amy talked about naming a class with a name that students find interesting instead of, for example, composition, social media production, and or marketing, that type of thing. Jesse, I don't know where you are on the screen, but there was like we had really good discussion on how to bring that real world example. Jessie talked about in her classes that students are dealing with in in education from early childhood all the way to adult learners, and how to build the assignments that way. Allison, I'm missing yours. I got distracted when you were talking. I'm sorry. But you know what we really talked about was just that bringing in the type of assignments that students will do once they're in the professional world, of putting them with the content that they are using regularly in the field. Yeah, so that's ours.
Well, that is really key. Kate brought up andragogy, and that's really helped. That really tells us, adult learners, they need to see how this relates to them. That's what's going to motivate them. That's what's going to make it engaging. So it sounds like you had some awesome discussions, and I'm really happy to hear that. Caitlin, I'm going to share my screen and then hand it back to you.
Thank you. And that's a great way to really wrap up our session also. We want to share a few different examples of applications and ways that you can use those career relevant skills within the classroom. And some of these were already mentioned. So the first are cognitive primers. And as many of you are aware, these are the cognitive primers are just introductions for students to the weekly content with real world scenarios and open-ended questions, whether it's a video or a text statement, just introducing them to the material in an interesting way to get them excited and ready for the content. There's also the authentic assessments that Lynn just mentioned, using scenarios and real world deliverables, such as the SWOT analysis that Brandy showed, or other templates to assess student learning. You can also bring in examples of current events and bring in relevant information to how the content applies to the workforce. Kind of like they mentioned that Chris uses, really using what are some current things, organizations that are out there to really get students prepared for the workforce. There's also incorporating real world problems to develop problem solving and critical thinking skills that we mentioned in our previous workshops. There are also case studies allow students to examine the content in specific real world situations. And these are very often used within the sciences, I've noticed, but case studies can be relevant throughout any program. And lastly, simulations or interactive activities that can guide students to understanding the content. All right, next slide, please. All right, to sum it all up, we want to highlight these 3 key points for incorporating workplace and real-world relevance in the classroom. So using these skills can help support our critical student goals in multiple ways. It also leads to an increase in student engagement and motivation, and allows faculty to leverage their expertise and experience in the field of study. So as you mentioned, we know that the faculty are the professionals in the field, and it's great to bring that into the classroom. All right, and next slide. All right, we don't want the conversation to end here, and please join us every Wednesday from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Pacific time at the Development Dish with Jen Zauer and Tricia Lauer. Everyone is welcome at these sessions where we discuss all things course development and offer a space to answer questions, brainstorm, and collaborate. We also have a variety of course development resources available on the Course Development Hub. Those links will be dropped in the chat shortly for both the Dish and the Hub. And again, we want to thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to our guests for presenting today. This recording, as well as our previous sessions, are available on our YouTube channel, which will also be dropped in the chat. We will look forward to seeing you again next year and seeing you in the new year. And we hope you all have an excellent break coming up in the next few weeks. So we are going to give you back our last 5 minutes. Thank you all for joining us.
Thanks all. Great presentation.
Putting those links now.
Big thank you to Brandy and Matt for joining us today.